Now that we've covered styles and effects, let's look at how individual players fit into the ensemble. We'll talk about what it takes to be a good section player and offer some specifics for lead players and rhythm players. We also have a few pointers on setting up the band. In short, we'll show you how to get the most out of your big band playing.
A big band usually has only one person to a part. Since only one person is on a part, there's more pressure on you to get it right, which means you have to practice. If you want a good big band, it requires everyone playing at their best all the time.
It really goes without saying that you have to have a pencil and an eraser in rehearsals. Marking your parts with changes and reminders is the most important thing you can do to help you play consistently. Even professionals have to mark their parts with things like cutoffs and key signature reminders. There are some markings that need to be consistent, so when someone else plays your part, they know what is meant. Over the years, musicians and big bands have developed a shorthand for marking their parts, and it works really well. One of the most important things to mark in your parts is cutoffs or releases. Cutoffs are where a note ends. In a big band, notes are usually stopped with the tongue, unlike in classical music, where notes are stopped with the airstream. If someone plays a note too long, you'll hear them hold over. One of the biggest differences between a tight big band and a sloppy one is whether or not everyone cuts the notes off at the same time. Marking cutoffs is easy. Just write a minus sign and then the number of the beat where the note needs to end. With most notes, it's pretty easy to see where it needs to stop, but sometimes it gets confusing. For example, here's a half note, which starts on beat 1 and stops on beat 3. If you needed a reminder for this note, you'd write -3 above it. That means that you hold the note until beat 3, and if you're counting 1, 2, 3, 4 in your head, the note stops when you reach 3. Sometimes folks get confused and think that off on 3 means holding the note through beat 3, but that's actually cutting it off on 4. Now here's a half note tied to an eighth note. Usually big band writers will do this because they want the half note to be played for full value, so they tie on an extra eighth note to make sure that everyone does that. Pretty sneaky, huh? This usually means cutting it off on beat 3 like the half note we just showed you. Or in slow tempos, you might cut it off on the upbeat of 3, which is its literal value. Then you would write -3.5. Who decides all this? Well, lead players are the ones who make these decisions. If it's unclear where the lead player is cutting off that note or you don't remember, just ask. Then be sure to mark your part so you know where to cut it off every time. Whole notes are often shortchanged. People usually hold them until they feel like stopping. Unless there's a good reason to do otherwise, hold a whole note all the way until beat 1 of the next measure. This is one of the most common cutoff reminders. Another thing you need to mark is dynamics. A lot of times, dynamics are assumed rather than written in a big band chart. Sometimes you won't see any at all. Lead players have to figure out where to add dynamics and communicate that to their section. In a good section, the other players are listening to what the lead player does and they're following it. But that means that the lead player is doing something more than just playing notes. If something is unclear, it never hurts to ask. Sometimes the lead player is trying to figure out what to do, and your input is important in order to reach a decision.
Quarter notes and eighth notes don't always get their full written value, so you might need to mark your parts to help you remember how to play them. Use a tenuto to mark full value notes, and a staccato to mark short ones. A marcato indicates that the note is short and accented. The horizontal accent can be played more than one way. Use your best judgment. If you see a lot of accents on notes that would usually be played short, play them short. Breath marks are also extremely important. Horn parts often don't have obvious places to breathe, so you have to decide as a section where you're going to take breaths. Mark these in with a comma above the place where you're going to breathe. Make sure that you write in accidentals when you miss them. We all miss a sharp or a flat from time to time, but try to ensure that you only miss something once. Circle key signature changes if you're having trouble seeing them or remembering them. It seems obvious, but having a pencil with a good eraser is one of the best things you can do to help rehearsal go smoothly.
The typical block formation for a big band has evolved over the years from bands like Duke Ellington, Count Basie, and Stan Kenton. There are good reasons why big bands are set up the way they are. Because the lead players set the style for the band, they have to be able to hear each other, and the section players have to be able to hear their lead players. The sound has to get out to the audience with the best possible balance, too. The seating chart we're showing you has the lead players in the middle of their sections and in line with each other. This lets them hear each other. It also means that the section players are never more than 2 people away from their lead player. The trumpets will usually be the loudest section, so they are in the back. The saxophone section is the softest, so they're up front. If the trumpet section is standing on a riser and the trombone section is seated on a riser, each player can get their sound out front and see the director. And that's assuming that the brass players have their bells up and not buried in their stands. It's crucial for proper balance that each player gets their bell pointing up and out to the audience. It might feel comfortable to point your bell at the floor, but why bother playing if you can't be heard? Where the rhythm section sits is particularly important. The bass player and the drummer need maximum communication, so they need to be close together. The drummer's hi-hat should be positioned in line with the trombones, which lets the drummer hear the horns. A grand piano should have its lid open towards the band, with the piano player's back to the audience. It's harder to see the director this way, but it allows the rhythm section to see and hear each other. The solo chairs, also known as the jazz chairs, need to be closest to the rhythm section. This allows them to hear the rhythm section and interact with them during solos. Also, the second players need to be next to the lead players. In the sax section, the 2 altos are placed together with the lead player in the center, which helps them listen to each other for intonation. The baritone saxophone and the bass trombone often play together, so they need to be in line. This seating arrangement is standard for the vast majority of big bands. If you're not using it, try it out and see if it doesn't improve your band.
Higher notes usually sound louder than low ones. The lead trumpet is the dominant voice in a big band if everyone is playing at the same dynamic level. This means that the lower voices need to play a little louder in order to have a full section sound. Just make sure you don't play too loud and bury the lead player. Be especially careful during soft passages because that's when it's easiest for a lead part to be buried. The sax section can have balance problems if the lead is written for soprano sax. It's easy for the other parts to cover it up because soprano tends to have a thinner sound. Here it is correctly balanced. The lead alto should play out in harmonized passages and back off in the unisons. Having the tenors play louder and the altos softer in unison passages will improve intonation and the overall sound. Good balance and blend is everyone's responsibility. It requires listening across the ensemble. Having the lower section parts play out a bit more goes a long way towards achieving proper balance.
Over the years, big bands have been one of the primary outlets for jazz. Many great soloists from Louis Armstrong to John Coltrane spent the early part of their careers in a big band. While soloists are expected to be unique and creative, they have to blend with their sections. In order to do this, they should match the style of their section's lead player. If you're a section player, listen to the lead player for articulation, cutoffs, breathing points, intonation, dynamics, and phrasing. If you're not sure about how your lead player is doing something, just ask. If you're doing your job as a section player and they're doing their job as a lead player, you shouldn't have to ask too often. Just remember to mark your part.
As you can see, lead players have a lot of responsibility. They have to be able to interpret many different styles and make musical decisions for the section. Good lead trumpet and trombone players should also have a strong upper register and endurance. They need to be able to play in tune, sight read well, have a good sound that'll project, and be able to perform under pressure. Their time and rhythmic feel are extremely important as well. Consistency of interpretation is crucial. In other words, a lead player needs to play things exactly the same way every time. Lead alto saxophonists and lead trombonists are also expected to be good improvisers because they often have solos in their parts. It's a lot to ask for, isn't it? The most important skill for any lead player is the ability to interpret styles correctly. You don't play a chart by Glenn Miller the same way that you would play one by Duke Ellington. There are big differences in vibrato, dynamics, phrasing, rhythmic feel, note lengths, and even instrumental sound.
It's up to the lead players to be familiar with these differences and to communicate them to their sections. If the lead players don't make these distinctions, every chart will sound the same. Don't necessarily put the person with the most amazing high chops on lead. Lead players need to be the best all-around musicians in a section. In the trumpet section, it's common to put the player with the best upper register on lead, even if that person has trouble with intonation, style, accuracy, and rhythmic feel. In this situation, consider putting the best all-around musician on lead and having the person with the high chops come in and nail the high notes. Or you could split up the lead parts. Either way, you're making a good compromise towards having the section sound the best it can. While there are 3 lead horn players in a big band, only one can be the primary lead player at a time. Whoever has the melody line at a particular time is the primary lead player. In full band passages or sections involving the trumpets and trombones, this is usually the lead trumpet. That's why the lead trumpet player is positioned in the back and center of the band. It allows everyone to clearly hear him or her. And while the other lead players are directly in front of the lead trumpet for the sake of listening, they also are leading their sections as well. This creates the best conditions for a unified horn section. There are also times where you'll see a small group play within a big band arrangement. For example, you might see a solo section with 1 trumpet, 1 trombone, and 2 saxes, plus the rhythm section. The lead player in this case is the person playing the melody. So follow this lead player like you would follow the lead player in your section. A lot of times it's difficult to hear in these mixed horn groups because you're spread out. Listen carefully to achieve the best balance, intonation, and unity of phrasing. Lead playing is a big job, and it doesn't come easily. Listen to a lot of big bands, particularly the ones that set the style for most of the music we play. This is crucial for a lead player. Check out recordings by Duke Ellington, Count Basie, and Stan Kenton, as well as many others listed in the companion guide. Try to figure out what the lead players are doing in these bands. What kind of vibrato do they use? What kind of sounds are they getting? What inflections do they use? How do they articulate, and what do they do with dynamics? If you're playing a chart that's been recorded, listen to it while following your part. Mark in the things they're doing that aren't notated and try to imitate them as much as you can. Eventually, you'll develop your own style, but it'll be a style with a strong foundation.
Sight reading is a critical skill for jazz musicians. Set aside some time each day to sight read something new. Ask your band director if you can pull some charts out of your band library to sight read. Duets are also a great way to improve your reading. As you read, scan ahead of the music to see what's coming next. Don't pick stuff that's over your head for sight reading practice. Start out with easy pieces before moving on to harder ones. Correct rhythm is the most important aspect of good sight reading. Focus on getting the rhythms right while reading. Once you get the rhythms, then concentrate on getting the notes. Everyone can hear if you play a wrong rhythm, but not everyone will know if you play a wrong note. You don't even need your instrument to practice reading rhythms. Just look at a piece of music and sing the rhythms in your head. Improvisation is another important skill in a big band. You have to know all your major and minor scales in every key along with the chords and arpeggios to be able to improvise well. So practice these things along with doing some improvising every day if you want to be a soloist in a big band. You should use a metronome for the majority of your practice time. Try putting the metronome on 2 and 4 while you practice. This will help develop your swing feel by simulating the drummer's hi-hat. Finally, do lots of listening. The more familiar you are with these styles, the better you'll play them. We don't often hear big band music in the popular media, so you'll have to make a special effort to seek it out. There's a list of jazz recordings in the companion guide that will help you get started with your listening.
This discussion of the big band rhythm section deals with fundamental topics that are important for every member of the band. So horn players, don't go away. You might also want to check out the Jazz Ambassadors video entitled The Jazz Band Rhythm Section, which deals with the rhythm section in greater detail.
Keeping time is the primary function of the rhythm section. The bass and drums share this role equally, establishing and maintaining the time and the feel. While a metronome may keep perfect time, it does not create any feel. Creating a good rhythmic feel, which is what gives the music life, should be your goal. The drummer and bass should always lock in on each other's time and feel. Quarter notes of the bass should match the quarter notes of the drummer's ride cymbal. Simplicity is the key. The rhythm section must clearly and concisely state the time and the feel in order to be interpreted by the rest of the band. The responsibility for time and feel is passed back and forth depending on the musical situation. For example, as an instrumentalist is developing and building a solo, the drummer may follow and complement the soloist. During this interplay, it's up to the bass player to keep the time steady for the rest of the band. On the other hand, if the bass player has a written part, for instance, a solo section with the trombones, the drummer would pick up the timekeeping responsibilities.
Being able to go back and forth between subdivisions of triplets and eighth notes is especially important in a big band context. The counting of subdivisions is also important when changing the tempo to double time or half time. In going from a ballad to a double time, for example, the eighth note subdivisions become quarter notes in the faster tempo. When going from swing to half time, the swing quarters become the eighth note subdivisions of the halftime. 1, 2, 3, 4, 2, 2, 3, 4, 1, and 2, and 3, and 4, and.
In rock and popular music, the snare and bass drum are the focus of timekeeping. However, in swing styles, the focus is on the hi-hat and ride cymbals. In this swing demonstration, the hi-hat functions as a snare drum would in pop music, providing the backbeat. The ride cymbal functions as the bass drum would, supplying the downbeats. Understanding the functions of the ride hi-hat combination is important to the aspiring big band drummer. In addition to maintaining time and feel, cymbals are important for providing changes in texture. Texture changes may be used to highlight changing sections of a tune. For example, change the choice of ride cymbal when the composition goes into another section. Texture changes should occur at the beginnings of sections and should follow the contour of the music. As another example, high-sounding cymbals may be used to accompany high-register instruments. These texture choices will help support each section throughout the arrangement.
The use of brushes is a very unique art form. The possibilities of expression they provide a drummer are endless. From ballads to up-tempo swing, brushes can give beautiful textures and deep rhythm to any groove and are a necessary voice for a drummer's vocabulary, particularly in jazz. We'll give two patterns that can be applied to multiple tempos. Let's take a look first at using brushes for swing ballads. This pattern is called over and under. Starting with the right hand, begin with beat 1 at about the 7 o'clock position on the head. Follow the rim counterclockwise around to about 10 o'clock. This is beat 2. Come to 3 o'clock, tap the and of 2, and return back to 7 o'clock for beat 3. Repeat back to 10 o'clock for beat 4, and return to 7 o'clock for beat 1 again. Here's what the right hand looks and sounds like.
1, 2, 3, 4.
For the left hand, the swing ballad is simply a mirror image of the right hand. Start at 2 o'clock on beat 1, slide over to 9 o'clock, then a little turn over to 5 o'clock for beat 2, clockwise around the rim all the way back to 2 o'clock for beat 3, little turn and back to 5 o'clock for beat 4. And here's what the left hand looks and sounds like. Be sure that the pattern in both hands remains circular. If there are corners, it will interrupt the smooth flow. Now let's put both hands together.
1, 2, 3, 4.
This next pattern for brushes is good for medium to fast swing tunes. Start with the left hand at 10 o'clock on beat 1, slide over to 4 o'clock for beat 2, back again for 3, and again for beat 4. It's that simple. Here's the left hand.
1, 2, 3, 4.
Now for the right hand. Begin somewhere between the center and the rim at about 7 o'clock. And just use a regular ride cymbal pattern like this.
1, 2, 3, 4.
Now let's put both hands together, and just for fun, gradually speed up the tempo.
1, 2, 3, 4.
There are countless other patterns, but these two should get you started and satisfy your need for using brushes. Once you learn these patterns, it's all up to you to decide when to use them. Express yourself.
The rhythm section has a lot of control over the dynamics in the big band. If the dynamics are played properly in the rhythm section, the rest of the band will follow suit. The rhythm section should be as committed to playing dynamics as it is to time, feel, and harmonic support of the band.